Welcome to Indiana Basketball Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for Indiana Basketball Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, as always, Ken Sterling. How you doing, Ken?
I am freezing my ass off up here in central Indiana after 5 days in the Florida Keys. Key West is the perfect place to watch Indiana basketball. And why I came back to the state of Indiana to watch Indiana basketball, I have no inkling whatsoever.
Well, I'm thinking maybe if they lose the next game, does that mean you're supposed to live in Key West all the time, or at least fly down to watch each game?
That is a great way to look at it. I'm going to pose that question to my wife as soon as this show ends.
She probably won't have a problem with it, will she?
No, she had a great time too. It's unbelievable. I cannot for the life of me figure out why it took us this long to find the perfect place to spend 5 days. It is just absolutely perfect.
All right. And another thing that was absolutely perfect for the Indiana Hoosiers on Saturday, Bob Knight wasn't there, but the team showed up this time, and that's the good thing. And the thing that stood out to me was against a physical team like Ohio State, the last couple of years, they did not have the guys inside to deal with them, and they did this time.
That's exactly right. And you know what? I think maybe there are cynics, and maybe there are a few out there, although I haven't heard from many, who would say that Ohio State just played a terrible game. But I think that Indiana had a whole lot to do with that. Ohio State didn't play well, but I think that was Indiana being connected on the defensive end and then doing the right thing offensively. I mean, we've talked about it for weeks, how they need to operate from the inside out, and that's what they did. That's how you create open looks from beyond the arc that are really makeable. You move the ball inside, you kick it out, you knock them down. That's how the game is played, and that's how it needs to work. Indiana did that. They had good Devontae in this game. Hopefully they continue to bring him off the bench. That seems to be, for whatever reason, good for his psychology. Indiana just looked terrific, and you're right, Knight didn't show up, and you know what? That's fine, because, I mean, what the hell? At this point, does it really matter a damn?
No, because you get an HD TV at Bob Knight's house, right? It's 70 inches. It's a lot more comfortable. Trace Jackson Davis is a guy that faced a lot of double teams offensively. Wasn't a big factor on the boards, but you talked about this play an inside out. I thought he passed the ball really well out of the post.
This is what you get with a kid from the state of Indiana who's played at a high level at both the high school. For a guy like Zach Hahn, who's a terrific coach down at Center Grove, and then his AAU team, these guys learn the game of basketball. And Trace Jackson Davis knows that it's about the collectivity of the offense, and it's not just about, hey, I got to get mine. And so as a freshman, he comes in understanding the game at a higher level, knows that when the post moves that he wants to execute aren't there, he can kick them out to a guy, an open guy, and that guy's going to not – all these guys can knock down open threes. It's just a matter of getting them open threes, and you need inside-out passes to make that happen.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the thing that stood out to me, and we've talked about this for the last month, maybe year, is Armaan Franklin. There was a moment where he hesitated to go after a loose ball, and Miller pulled him and didn't put him back in. And I think that was a great move, and it's what we've been asking for forever. So obviously, Archie, we know you're listening. Thanks for listening.
And here's the thing, too, because that play, Archie turns around and bangs his fists against the scorer's table in an obvious showing of displeasure, right? And that lets us know that he saw it. And we're all yelling at the TV at the same time when it happened in real time. Get on the floor. He's yelling the same thing. He's banging his fist. He shows that we're all on the same page. And that makes it so much easier to watch, right? You know, because we get now that he gets it and that he's willing to share that with guys and hold them accountable for their inactivity. It also shows a willingness to hold the guy accountable, meaning that he believes with Armaan Franklin, he can hold him accountable without getting, splashback from a petulant kid who's going to, be grumpy for the next 3 weeks. Armaan Franklin takes that kind of stuff well. And so, I mean, that was as the genesis of that thing was a kid not getting on the floor, and that's not good. But everything else associated with it was terrific.
Yeah, I think another big move was starting Rob Finney, and he comes out and he hits 3 for threes almost right away. Had a hard time shooting after that, but he had a team-leading 7 rebounds along with 4 steals. Indiana is just a much better team when Fennessy has an impact, and I think Devontae Green coming off the bench is actually a good thing for Devontae Green's game.
And I think it's great to have those two guys playing together with Devontae kind of playing the more traditional two. And I know we're positionless, and I know everybody can bring the ball up, and all the guys can post, all the guys can set screens, whatever. But when you've got Rob on the floor operating as kind of the floor general, and you've got Devontae as a sniper on the wing, that is a much more workable offensive structure than with Devontae kind of running the point and Al being at the kind of that off guard. This was so much better. And I think that that's part and parcel with Rob getting healthier and being able to practice a little bit. And so he's getting more run. Hopefully he can stay healthy because as we saw this last year too, he is absolutely that core piece of the puzzle that you cannot win without.
Yeah, and the other thing we saw was they took 12 threes, they made 6, and I think the difference here was most of these threes were not going one-on-one and trying to create it yourself. It was more in the flow of the offense.
Yeah, and you can't do that. And these guys ought to know that nobody's that good. Like, these guys aren't James Harden. You know what I mean? You can't break a guy down and then count on your own abilities to knock down a 23-foot jumper. That's just crazy for an 18 to 22-year-old to expect from himself, no matter how talented he is. And there's no doubt that Devontae Green is a talented guy. You know, I was watching the Big Ten Network today because I refused to watch the Stephen A. Smith showcase on ESPN. So at 11 o'clock, I saw that they were going to have that hour piece on the 1981 Indiana Hoosiers. And I've seen it before, but I love the way they talk about Landon Turner deciding that he wasn't the most important person on that team and that he needed to comport himself in a team-centric way in order for that team to flourish. And then they did. They started out 7-5, as you well know, and then they wind up winning the national championship. And I couldn't help but think about Devontae Green, hoping that teammates like Turner had Tolbert and Isaiah and Randy and Ted, hoping that Devontae with these guys, that he's getting that same kind of look, man, you're good enough. You don't have to show us every time you touch a damn basketball. Let's play team basketball. Let's win games, and then let's see where we go with our lives.
Yeah, and the other thing that really stuck out to me is I thought this was the best offensive performance, even though they scored 66 points, because Ohio State's one of the best defensive teams in the country. And really, if it wasn't for atrocious free throw shooting, IU would have been in the 70s. And I think the stat on that is Ohio State's only given up in the 70s twice the entire year.
Yeah, 20 of 36 just isn't going to get it done. And Indiana's in the upper, I don't know, what are they, 282nd or something in Ken Palm from the line. You can't have that. There's no way to alibi it. There's no way to say, like Archie got mad last week on the radio show about people saying that they have trouble shooting threes. Well, look, you don't have defenses and you don't have bad passing leading to missed foul shots. You stand there 15 feet away and you knock the damn things down. And if there's some kind of structural deficiency in the way these guys are doing it, you know, you got to fix that. I don't get guys hitting 20 or 36, but you're right. If they hit another 10, all of a sudden they're 76, 52, and you feel really, really good about this game. They played well enough to blow out Ohio State. And, you know, that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to hold court at Assembly Hall and then go on the road and steal a few. And in that way, you know, get to 11-9 in the Big Ten maybe and go to the tournament.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave out, I think Joey Brunk and even Deron Davis, even though he only played 11 minutes, played well down below against Caleb Wesson. Yep. They both did a good job, and they need Davis, especially in the Big Ten, because most of these teams got a big guy. You need Deron Davis to be able to come in and give you 10 or 15 minutes defensively.
You know, because Trace Jackson Davis isn't that kind of a big. You know, you got a guy like Caleb Wesson. Wesson's got that big, giant can, and you need to match can for can. And Deron Davis has – you look at Trevion Williams for Purdue, same kind of matchup disorder for Indiana, with Deron Davis playing good basketball and not picking up fouls on 2 successive possessions and being taken out of the game after playing 45 seconds, you've got a real chance to match up against these guys in a very productive way.
Yeah, and as we look forward, we've got Rutgers coming up next, and this is a road game. And this
Yeah.
is huge. There haven't been many road teams to win. Rutgers actually can attest to that as they lost 54 to 51 at Illinois on Saturday. But this Rutgers team, they beat Penn State by double digits at home. This is a good basketball team this year.
Yeah, and Peichel's a good coach, and that's really, I think, the key to the depth of the conference is the quality of the coaching. You look at guys like Brad Underwood and Steve Peichel, who've kind of taken some slings and arrows from their fan bases. These guys are terrific coaches, and Rutgers is starting to play like it. I think they're tied for third in the Big Ten, and to this point, you've only had 5 road victories in the Big Ten. Of all the games, all the Big Ten against Big Ten team play, you've got 5 Big Ten wins on the road. And man, that makes these games all the more important, right? Because you should be able to compete with Rutgers, and then again on Saturday at Nebraska.
Yeah, and you got to figure you got to split these two. But if you could get this win at Rutgers, and when you look at Rutgers, what do you think is the key to being able to beat Rutgers?
I think it's all on Indiana. I think Indiana plays the way Indiana can play, and you know, regardless of the venue. If they can work the ball inside out and if they play connected defense, I think they got a chance to beat anybody at home or on the road. They've just got to prove that they can do it more than, you know, once in a blue moon. They got to do it again and again. That's got to become the norm, not the aberration. They need to make the way they played on Saturday at Assembly Hall the habit. You know, they've got to do that game after game after game, or they won't have a chance the way that 81 team did to kind of make their mark and figure out how to become best as a unit instead of just figuring out how to become best individually. I think that one of the, not to take an off-ramp here, but I think one of the bad aspects, one of the unintended consequences of the 20-hour-a-week rule is that teams are spending a hell of a lot of that time developing players physically. And that doesn't leave so many hours for teaching the game of basketball. And I think that is causing a deterioration in the way basketball is played if you don't recruit guys who already know the game to kind of an advanced level. Guys like Armand Franklin and guys like Trace Jackson Davis. I think it puts a premium on recruiting Indiana guys. And if you don't, you're never going to have enough hours in the week to be able to teach people how to play.
All right. Rutgers, 1976, they went undefeated too, Kent.
Did they?
Until the Final Four. They were in the Final Four with IU in 1976.
I had no idea. The Scarlet Knights, look at the history.
You
By
really
God,
don't remember
the State
that?
University of... No.
I thought
No,
I found
remember
somebody
the
I
final.
could talk about the 1976 Scarlet Knights with.
Well, no. You way overestimated my interest in... Hell, that was before the Big East was even formed.
Yeah, but it's the
I
same
have
year.
no idea what
This is the
conference they
thing.
were
The
in.
Final Four that year was undefeated Rutgers against Michigan and then undefeated Indiana against UCLA, and it was set up so the national championship game could have been 2 undefeated teams playing each other.
I would hope that Indiana would have won that game by 4 million.
Well, actually,
I don't know what Rutgers had.
They had Phil Sellers and Mike Dabney, and then they had 3 guys in Eddie Jordan, Hollis Copeland, and James Bailey that all 3 played in the NBA. And they blew out Purdue early in that season.
Eddie Jordan was a terrible coach for
But
Rutgers.
we're talking about playing
That much
basketball,
I know.
though. Jeez.
I don't know anything else.
How about
but you
this
said
one?
Eddie Jordan, I was like, I know that dude.
This is one you'll never get. In the NCAA tournament, who did they beat to get to the Final Four?
Well, let's see. Who did they beat to get to the final? I will say Louisville.
No. They beat the Virginia Military Institute in the NCAA quarterfinals.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
They blew them
Whoever
out by like
thought?
16, and they blew out Connecticut before that by 14, and I think they beat Princeton at the buzzer in the first round of the tournament. Wonder if that was Pete Carroll still.
Well, it could have been. Him, I remember.
Okay, but you don't remember Rutgers, really?
No.
I think they
No,
even did one of those
I
Big
was
Ten
living in
specials on them.
Chicago then, and college basketball was so far down the list of priorities for a youngster in North suburban Chicago. I can't even tell you. I did watch a championship game that Indiana won, I think 86-68, but prior to that, I don't even know if the games were on TV.
Yeah, Rutgers ended up 33-2, and they lost to Michigan by double digits in the semifinals, and then UCLA beat them in that
Oh, the
horrid
third place.
consolation game they used to play.
Thank God they got rid of that thing. It served no purpose whatsoever. That was just terrible.
No, I would think losing your first game of the entire season would probably put a damper on playing a consolation game, even against UCLA.
Well, hopefully, Indiana's fortunes are equal to what Michigan's fortunes were when they played Rutgers in 1976.
There you go. Hopefully not like Purdue's, though. All right, do they win against Rutgers?
Yeah, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to put it together. I'm going to go ahead and assume, because as you well know, I am a born optimist, that Archie
them to
Miller
lose last game.
Well, I also have a terrible memory about my own behaviors and psychologies. Yeah, I think that he got their attention, and maybe that's going to last more than one game in a row, and that Archie isn't going to think, oh, we've got it all fixed, that he's going to continue to do what's necessary to get their attention and make sure they play basketball the right way. I think they're going to win this.
All right, as you can tell, I'm still sick, so this show is going to be about 10 to 15 minutes shorter than normal. I'm going to pick Indiana to beat Rutgers again. I think Indiana's going to win a national championship now, Kent.
You know what? They have it in them to play at a really high level. You can't tell me, and I know you won't because you just did, that this is an Indiana team that could at least play at the level of Loyola 2 years ago.
That's what I was thinking.
Right?
And the thing is this, right now, when we look at the teams that teams like Duke are losing to, is it Stephen F. Austin?
Yeah, right.
There is no clear number one here. And I'll tell you, between me and you, don't tell anybody, I think the best team I've seen this year is Butler.
Butler's really good.
Yeah,
Butler,
because
you
defense
talk about
travels.
A team, yeah, and they play the right way. They are really, really good. They're committed to each other, and it's not just lip service. We watch them at practice periodically. They've got a media availability tomorrow, and they're always generous with their access, where we get to watch what they're going to do a little bit. And I love the way they respond to LaVall Jordan. I love the way the seniors on that team lead, and that is a real difference. I mean, Painter always says, "Get old, stay old." Butler's gotten old, and as those guys have gotten old, guys like Sean McDermott came to Butler as a freshman who was skinny and thought to be a shooter. He's worked his ass off. He's set an example within that program for hard work and diligence. Kamar Baldwin has done exactly the same thing. Aaron Thompson is a wonderful kid. These guys all get it, and I think these guys that culture is strong enough that it's actually lifting these guys above places kind of like Indiana, and I hate to say it, that really don't have any discernible culture at this point.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I look at this, I'll tell you another team I really like in the Big East is Seton Hall.
Yeah, and they play each other on Wednesday night at Hinkle Fieldhouse. That's going to be a hell of a game and a lot of fun. I mean, Big East basketball is just terrific. They're so deep and also well coached and really, really fun. I mean, all those games are a battle of will, and that Butler was able to beat Creighton in the way they did, I thought was really telling, and that if they can stay healthy, they got a real chance to raise some hell.
And I'll tell you, another team, just to throw it in there, is San Diego State.
Really?
Oh, yeah. San Diego State beat Creighton by 31 earlier in the year.
Wow.
And they beat Iowa by double digits also, and they're undefeated right now.
Wow, I've not invested in San Diego State to this point, so I'm going to have to do that.
Neither had I until I noticed they were ranked 16th last week. And then I watched them play Utah, and they beat Utah by 30. And they beat Utah State by 9 at Utah State. And Utah State was supposed to be one of the Cinderella teams this year, possibly.
any game that starts like at 10 or 10:30 on TV, I'm afraid I'm going to wind up with Bill Walton as the
Oh
analyst,
God!
and I'm automatically repelled
Did
from
you see
that
the
broadcast.
USC UCLA game?
No.
I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure that him and the guy doing the game with him were both stoned. It was bad. I'll have to find the clip. I don't even remember what they were talking about because it's late at night, and one of my buddies recorded it on his phone and sent it to me because I don't watch the Pac-12 just because of Bill Walton. And the stuff they were talking about was seriously weird.
Well, if the play-by-play guy paired with Walton wasn't stoned, maybe Walton was stoned enough for the both of them.
Yeah, or I think to do it with Walton, you have to be stoned to understand what he's saying.
That's about right. He is a unique talent who has crafted almost an unworkable style of broadcasting into a career for which he is paid really, really well, and I just flat don't get it.
I know. That's a big oops right there. You want to talk about your book, Kent?
It is. It is. You can read about all of my oops and none of Bill Walton's in the book, Oops, The Art of Learning from Mistakes and Adventures, available on Amazon. Just search Oops. And Kent, one thing before we go, Mike, that I want to, today on Dan Dockich's radio show, which I know all...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because we haven't got a chance to get your show up, but I saw something about Bob Knight and Dan Dockich on there.
Yeah, the thing with Dan and with Knight is that Dan earned the right to say whatever the hell he wants about Bob Knight through 16 years of playing and coaching with him. And for people to think they either understand Dan's relationship with Knight or that they can cast judgment upon it, as Dan explains it on his show, those people aren't, I don't think, playing from a full deck. And they don't understand what they're doing. And they're among those people, like we talk about the need, and we did on this show, for players to listen to coaches, and that it's important for everybody to be on the same page. And I think it's really important for IU fans, when they listen to Dan talk about Bob Knight, to understand it's through the filter of a guy and from the mind of a guy who worked with him closely for 16 years. And I think that we've all got to assume, me, you, everybody, that Dan knows better than we do, and we would be a whole hell of a lot better off listening to him than casting judgment after the first 4 words that come out of his mouth.
Well, for any of the listeners that don't know, especially if you're not in Indiana, what exactly did he say that made people angry?
Well, there have been several things over the years, but today what he said is that he believes that Knight did what he did in going to the Marian University game instead of Indiana as a direct smack in the face to Indiana University, and he uses the players and their get-togethers, and there was a reunion this past weekend on Saturday of former players at that game. Knight chooses those moments to most obviously reject any overtures from Indiana and try to make Indiana look foolish. And Dan says to think that Knight was doing anything other than that just shows a complete ignorance of who the man is. And so I mean, they're really, I don't think that there's anybody like Dan Dockich from the perspective of, hey, who do we think is going to know the most and be the most honest about Bob Knight? I think, Dan kind of stands alone on that mountaintop.
Well, I think this. I don't know why anybody would question what he said there anyways, because anybody that watched a man here for 20 or 30 years coach should know that's what he's doing.
Right. He's a strategist, and, we don't know, or I don't know exactly, when pictures are taken of him, he doesn't look altogether well. And the picture on Saturday was Steve Downing and some other fella to Knight's right. I don't know who that guy was. But Knight didn't look great. And, anybody who's seen him speak, and this goes back to when he introduced Donald Trump during his campaign in 2016, he got up on stage at the state fairgrounds and told a story that was a little bit related to what was going on, and then kind of segged into another story which went nowhere and just kind of left him sort of walking on the stage without much else to do. So Trump came out, and that's where he was 3 years ago. I don't know where he is in his health now, and we all hope for the best. But listening to Dan talk about Knight and his behaviors and kind of motivations, I think is just that's a good play from fans, not an indifferent or negative play toward Knight. I think that we've all got to understand that Dan knows a little bit more about that than we do.
Yeah, but also those fans love Coach Knight, and are always going to try to think the best if they can, if you know what I mean. And they're going to be mad that they think anybody's attacking him.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't say it wasn't.
I mean, shoot, we can wake up in the morning and think that the sky's purple, but you know what? That doesn't happen too often. It's usually either blue or cloudy.
Well, sometimes it's kind of orangish red.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can.
All right.
So.
All right, guys. Game Wednesday, show Thursday.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, we'll be back Thursday at 2 or 3 o'clock.
Wait, your call, brother.
Yeah, we'll do Thursday, 3 o'clock. We'll come back and we'll talk about IU's second straight win as they beat the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, 74-59. I got mocked last time I gave a score with a big spread, and I wasn't too far off of that score, by the way.
Keep betting on you.
Yeah, I'm on a roll. Won 2 playoff games over the weekend, too. I'm a rich man now, $50 more in my pocket.
Done.
So I just got to cut. Who you got tonight, LSU or Clemson?
Oh, I'm going to root for LSU just because I think Ed Orgeron is one of the guys in college football coaching who does it for all the right reasons and seems to have an enthusiasm for his job that I think we all ought to have.
Well, betting against Clemson's always dangerous, but
yeah,
it just seems like it's meant to be this year for them.
I hope so. I hope I hope the Bengals take Burrow and that Burrow winds up being as good as a lot of people think he's going to be. And I wish that the NFL would allow a guy like Lawrence, who would probably be the number 1 overall pick, come out and earn money rather than coming back for a third utterly meaningless year at Clemson.
Yeah, but I think if he had the choice, he would wait and come out next year.
Why?
Because there's a chance he may not be the number 1 pick this year. He will be next year.
Well, he checks every single box. And I think, anybody who wouldn't draft Lawrence number 1, I think would need to. The guy hadn't lost a college football game as a starter, and I don't think he lost a high school game. I think he lost a state championship game as a junior. He hadn't lost many games. I think he's lost like 1 game since he was 12.
Yeah. Tim Tebow was like that too.
Well, yeah, but this guy's.
Oh, I think they're both going
different.
to be special. But I can tell you now, just from some people I've talked at a few NFL front offices, they think it would be about 50-50, and it's just according who's picking. Yeah, I mean, because Burrow, let's not forget this. He has beaten 6 top 10 teams at the time they played this year, and he's completed 80% of his passes.
And hasn't failed to complete 72% in any game.
Yeah,
that's unreal.
He's like 78 or 79% for the year. And I think he runs what's more of a pro-style offense. I think they're both going to be studs. So
I hope so.
That's what I'm saying, though. I think that he would have maybe waited a year just to make sure he's the number 1.
He could. Or, you know what happens to guys every once in a while? They get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
It's not. But it's football. Sometimes you get hurt. I don't know if he would come out or not. He's only a sophomore. He is kind of young. I agree with you. I think if a dude's 14 and he can play in the NFL, they ought to let him play. But
right. Why they and I kind of get it. Like, you want guys to develop and mature, and the NFL is not a boys' league. I totally understand that. But I think it's restraint of trade, and I don't think it's necessary in a lot of cases. I
don't think there's a lot of cases where an 18 or 19-year-old could play in the NFL. But you can't tell me that a guy like Herschel Walker coming out of high school couldn't have probably walked on an NFL field and held his own. Right. Exactly. But he was a grown-ass man by the time he was 12, I think.
He really was. And a guy like Earl Campbell, going back a little bit.
Yeah, Bo Jackson.
Yep. He's the best athlete I've ever seen. That argument, who's the best athlete ever? At least the guys during, I don't know what Jim Thorpe was like, But Bo
Jim
Jackson
Thorpe
is the best athlete ever.
But remember this with Jim Thorpe. This is a guy that won the Olympic decathlon and pentathlon in the same week. But he also played Major League Baseball, started and played in the NFL. So there's a lot to be said there, too.
Right.
And what about Chuck Connors, the rifleman?
Well, he played for the Cubs briefly. He played for the Dodgers.
Yeah,
right.
And he played
some
for
basketball.
the Celtics for a little while.
Dave DeBusschere he played for the White Sox and the Knicks. Yeah, a lot of Deion Sanders.
Danny Ainge.
Yeah, well, Danny Ainge was a punch and Judy 220 hitter for the Blue Jays. And
hey, you know what though? How many
wears me out.
people would kill to be a punch and Judy 220 hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays?
I couldn't hit 220 off a machine.
No, so quit knocking it then. I'm just saying he was a hell of a. I'm not saying he was up there with it. Deion Sanders.
Yeah, right.
I don't like him, but I mean, the year he played in Cincinnati, he was actually really good. Now the other years, he was just kind of a guy that could get on base and steal a couple bases. But I think he was a guy that if he would have concentrated on baseball, it'd have been great. But the thing about Bo Jackson is, the dude scored a touchdown in a Pro Bowl. 6 months later, hit a home run in the All-Star game.
You know, and the thing that he did that was just awesome, and I saw it live, when he came back from getting his hip replaced, he came back as a pinch hitter, first at bat. And it was a huge at bat. It was like in the ninth at New Comiskey Park. And there was just this buzz about that moment. It was like, oh, he's going to hit a home run. That's what Bo's going to do here. And he did. You know, he just, whatever the moment called for, he did. And his hose from left field was unlike anything I've ever seen. He had an arm that was absolutely unreal.
And when he hit the ball, did it sound different than when everybody else did?
Yeah.
Sound like a gunshot?
He was,
cannon?
And unbelievably fast.
Because I never saw him play
shame.
in person, but I can tell you that the only time I've heard this, and I've been told it like Mickey Mantle, but you remember Eric Davis?
Yeah.
Eric Davis, when he'd hit a home run in Cincinnati with his bat speed and them skinny-ass arms, it sounded like a rocket got launched.
Is that right?
Yeah, and the funniest thing I've ever seen now that the guy didn't die was 1988, second game of the season. The Reds were playing the Cardinals in a day game. I'm there with my dad, and we're right behind home, green section, which was like the second level, so it's not too far away. And there's a guy selling beer, and he's coming down the beer aisle. And Eric Davis lines a shot off of this beer guy's shoulder.
Oh, jeez.
That dude dropped like he got shot. There was beer all over the place. And we thought he might have killed the guy. If it had hit him in the head, he probably would have. But when Davis hit it, it sounded like a damn gunshot. And when it hit that dude's shoulder, it sounded like a gunshot. It took them about 20 minutes to get him out in an ambulance.
Well, it's good he didn't die so we can laugh about it today.
Yeah, wonder if he still laughs about it. He probably gets up every morning saying, that freaking Eric Davis rubbing his shoulder.
You know, and that is an interesting way. Like if you're at a high school game or a youth game and you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden you hear that whack and it sounds just right. You know, even with an aluminum bat, there's a different sound to the ping. You know you got a hitter. You know, you can tell by the sound.
Yeah.
I remember watching the 84 playoffs between the Cubs and the Pirates, and they were doing an interview with Ernie Banks in Game 1.
Oh,
I think Leon Durham. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Leon Durham, I think, came up and hit a home run, and Banks had his back to the play. And as soon as he heard the crack, and it was in the middle of his own sentence, he heard the crack and interrupted himself and said, home run. And out it went. You can tell some guys just have that sound.
Yeah, Leon Durham was from Cincinnati, too, I think.
And boy, oh boy, all the potential in the world and very little of the productivity.
And that ball went between his legs in Game 5.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Thanks for bringing up
I hated the Cubs. I was cheering for the Padres. I even cheered when Steve Garvey hit a home run to win Game 4. And that Game 4 was one of the best baseball games I ever saw.
Well, you're not an American. Because no, well-functioning American is ever going to root for Steve Garvey to do anything good.
Remember this, though. I was a Reds fan, and I hated Garvey and the Dodgers. But by the mid-'80s, he wasn't a Dodger anymore. But
No.
what did happen was, I used to go to a lot of Reds games with my dad, and Cubs fans were overbearing as hell in 1984 because they hadn't had a winning season since 1969. So you show up to Riverfront Stadium and there's 35,000 Cubs fans there with little bears, and it was just aggravating, Kent. I'm sorry.
Hey, you know what? You should have just said thank you very much for spending all your cash in our city.
Well, I don't live in Cincinnati. I'm like 25 minutes away, so I didn't get any of the tax benefits either.
And there's still the Brennemans, well, not Marty anymore, but Marty and Tom the last few years, they would always carp about Cubs fans and how ridiculous they were. And
hey, we hate the Cardinals more than the Cubs, though.
Well, we all agree on that.
Yeah.
We all agree in our hatred of, although, you know what, from living in St. Louis, I got to tell you, there is not a better functioning front office in all of baseball than St. Louis's. Not necessarily from Mozeliak and putting together a roster, but the guys who do business there and the marketing guys are absolutely wonderful, and they totally get the fan experience. And I really, when I was there for 2 years, gained a lot of respect for the way they do business. I still don't like them as a ball club, but, man, they do things the right way for a city that really needs a franchise to do it the right way.
Yeah, and the Reds are going to win the division this year, though.
Well, good luck with that.
Well, they will.
They are not going to win a division.
They are,
good
too.
Lord.
I'll bet you $1 million on this show right now they have a better record than the Cubs.
Well, I'm not going to take that bet, but I'm not going to how about you bet me $1 million that the Reds are going to win that division?
Okay. $1 million.
$1 million.
Yes.
I'm coming for you.
It doesn't matter. I don't have it. You better have it if I win, though, because I know people. I'm in southeastern Indiana. It's not all cushy like it is up there where you live.
Yeah, well, you know what? How about this? If the Cubs finish with a better record, you got to drive your ass up here and buy me a 4-way at the Skyline that's about 2 miles from my house. And if the Reds finish on top of the Cubs, I'll drive down to Cincinnati or wherever your outpost is 25 miles away, and I'll buy you a 4-way.
I'm in Indiana.
And where, in Lawrenceburg?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's where the more sophisticated people in Indiana live.
Is that right?
No,
does
really.
It say, welcome to Orangeburg, where all the sophisticated people in Indiana live?
Yeah, and you know what? The sign is written in crayon, like every other sign in Indiana. Everybody has a pickup truck that's rusted and a coon dog.
Most sophisticated coon dogs in Indiana, that I believe.
Yes, my coon dog's very sophisticated.
Nice. Does he wear a little kind of a beret and smoke a pipe?
No, he just lays on the couch all day and then gets up to goes poop and pee and then comes back and lays on the couch all day. My son got him hoping for a hunting dog, but basically what he got was like a lab in a coon's body. That,
you know what, though, what do you want out of it? I don't want a little dog like yipping and yapping and running in circles all over the damn house.
I don't see why people want little dogs. No offense to people with little dogs.
No, put a dog that just stays on the couch, doesn't do anything all day, just lays there and looks at you and gives you whatever affirmation you need. You know what? That's all you need.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. We'll talk to you Thursday.
We're going to get off here. Make sure you check out Oops on Amazon. And you can follow Ken Sterling at Ken Sterling. You can follow The Grueling Truth at Grueling Truth. We will be back Thursday. So for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. He's Kent Sterling. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.